Okay, everybody, welcome to lesson 4. As you can see, today's lesson is on key signatures. So the first question we need to figure out is what exactly do we mean by a key? So a key is essentially a group of different pitches or notes that work well together and sound well together when expressed in various ways. It's most often based on a principal set of pitches called a scale, which is something we discussed in an earlier lesson, which I will link in the description below. And so the collection of sharps or flats that we see at the beginning of a piece of music often correlate to those that feature throughout a particular scale. And this collection of sharps and flats on the far left hand side is called the key signature. So these here are what I am referring to when I say key signature. Before we go forward, I just want to make known in this video that I'm going to be stating the sharps and flats that are present in different scales in a matter-of-fact kind of way. However, if you would like to learn more about the whys and wherefores of these, you can check out lesson 3, which is linked below. So what is a key signature? Why do we use them? And what does it really mean for us sitting down to play a piece of music? So a key signature is a collection of sharps and flats that are printed on the far left hand side of each line of music that inform us of the notes that are consistently sharpened or flattened throughout a piece of music. So this makes it more efficient and easier for us to read the music than if we were to have to place the symbol in front of every affected note every time they arise. So for example, here we have a key signature with an F sharp at the start. F sharp because the two horizontal lines of the sharp symbol are encompassing the line in which the note with the letter name F is positioned. So what that means is that every time you come across an F in this piece of music, regardless of what pitch it is played as an F sharp. So for example, this is an F, the first space for treble clef is an F, which means because of this key signature, it is played as an F sharp. Here's another F, also played as an F sharp. Okay, and if it wasn't for that key signature, this is what this piece of music would look like. As you can see and imagine, really, things can just get quite cluttered if you have numerous notes that are sharpened or flattened consistently in a piece of music. So it just makes more sense to stick it at the beginning in the form of a key signature. Now we're going to go on to identifying keys in practice. There will be a time when you become familiar enough with the different scales in music that you will be able to identify and recognize the major scale that the key signature relates to, just from your knowledge of the different sharps and flats that feature in various scales. However, there are other ways that you can use, which I will go through in this video. So for example, this is the key of C major. Just to note that for the moment, we're going to focus on major keys. So C major is a scale that some of you may already be confident in knowing has no sharps or flats. Therefore, granted, we know that the tonality of this piece of music is major. We can tell by looking at the key signature here, in which there's no sharps and flats, that this piece of music is in the key of C. To double check this, you could always construct the major scale using the pitch intervals that we know make up a major scale starting on the note C. And this will also result in a scale that has no sharps or flats. So that is another way to double check things. Again, the pitch intervals that make up different scales are something that was gone through in lesson 3. For the sake of efficiency in an exam setting, I'm going to teach you a little trick that we can use to identify the key signature if we know that it is a major key. And how you can do this with key signatures that feature sharps is by looking at the last sharp printed. In this instance, there's only one, so this is the first and last sharp printed. And the key signature is the note a half step or semitone above the last sharp. So this sharp is encompassing the line in which the note with the letter name F is. So F sharp up one semitone would bring us to G. Therefore, this is the key of G major. We'll just go through a few more examples. This sharp, the last sharp, is on the space in which the note with the letter name C is. So C sharp up one semitone or half step would bring us to D. So this is the key of D major. If you were to construct the scale of D major, you would also find that scale of D major has an F sharp and a C sharp featured, just like the key signature here. Here, the final sharp is on the space where the note with the letter name G would be, because the top line here is an F, so one space above F makes it a G. G sharp up one semitone or half step would bring us to A. So this is the key of A major. Final sharp in this instance is on the line in which the note with the letter name D is. D sharp up one semitone, E major. The scale of E major has an F sharp, C sharp, G sharp and D sharp, confirming this. There are a couple of others which I will show you at the end of the lesson. However, for now, we're just going to move on to key signatures that feature flats. Again, for the moment, we're assuming that we know that the piece is in a major key. Similarly, if we are very familiar with our different scales, we may know from looking at the key signature with a singular B flat that this is the key of F major, because the scale of F major has a B flat. However, if you're stuck, we have another little trick that can help us to identify these. Now, F major is the only instance in which this little method won't apply, so that's just one just to remember. However, when you have more than one flat present at the key signature, if it's in a major key, the key name is the name of the second last flat. So here, the second last flat just happens to be the first flat also, and that is on a B. So B flat major is this key signature. Second last flat in this instance is on an E, key of E flat major. Second last, an A, key of A flat major. Second last is on the D, key of D flat major. Again, there are a couple more which I will go through at the end of this video, but for now we will just leave identifying key signatures there. So now we know what a key signature is and how it affects which notes we play. The next step is to know how to write one for ourselves for compositional purposes, or perhaps if it's asked in a music theory exam of sorts. Firstly, we're going to focus on the key signatures that feature sharps. The sharps are always placed in the same order when functioning as a key signature. This is the order here, from left to right. However, there is a rhyme we can use. Farther chars goes down and ends battle. By all means, make up your own. That's one that's just quite commonly used. So for an example, let's take a look at the key of A major. So F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp, all of which we know are present in the scale of A major, which is printed here below. I just want to know that although in the scale of A major, the order in which the sharps arise is different, that the order in which the sharps and flats arise in the scale actually has no bearing on the order in which they are placed at the beginning of the staff when functioning as a major key. So what I mean by that is that the key of A major, even though in the scale of A major, C sharp comes first, followed by F sharp, followed by G sharp, when you're writing the key of A major, you always follow the order of sharps according to this rhyme, which means that the F sharp is put first, followed by the C sharp, then followed by the G sharp. Now, while some of you may be confident enough in your knowledge of scales to write key signatures based on your knowledge of the sharps and flats that feature in different scales, for those of you who are perhaps like a little backup system to help you remember this, there are two different ways we can go about this. So one way is working with the same kind of approach we used earlier to quickly identify the major scales. By that, I'm referring to our use of looking at the last sharp printed in the key signature and simply going up a semitone to identify the key. As I'm sure some of you have already gathered, we could similarly apply this logic in a kind of reverse manner. So if someone asked you, for example, to write the key of A major, you know that the last sharp featured on the key signature is going to be a semitone below A, which is a G sharp. And if this G sharp is the last sharp featured in the key signature, that tells us that these are the sharps featured, and as always printed in this order: F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. And that method could be used for any major scale featuring sharps. So for example, if someone asked you to write the key signature of B major, the last sharp is going to be a semitone below B, which is an A sharp. And if A sharp is the last sharp in the key signature, then the key signature of B major contains an F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp. Now there is another method if that's just a bit confusing for you guys. I've got some more rhymes for you. So across the top here, I have a rhyme: good dogs always eat bacon fried. Choose. To be honest, not really sure if choose is a word. This is kind of what I was envisaging. By all means, you guys can make up your own rhymes. These are just the names of the key signatures. And down the left-hand side here, we have the sharps. The same rhyme we had in the previous slide. Now, how we can work this to help us to figure out what sharps feature in different key signatures. We simply use the grid in this kind of a motion. So if someone asked you to write the scale of G major, the first word to the first word here, so G major, features an F sharp. If someone asked you to write the key of D major, second across, second down, that means D major features an F sharp and a C sharp, and this would go so on and so forth. So if someone asked you to write the key of A major, third across to the third down, A major features an F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp, and so on and so forth. And now to consider how we would go about writing major key signatures that feature the flats. We have another rhyme to remember the order in which flats are written, because just like the sharps, flats are always written in this order when featured on a key signature. Big effort always drives great change for, and then person of your choice. I have you here, but obviously we know that there's no note Y, so this is really where the rhyme ends out. However, I would just like to point out that if you like, you can just choose one of these rhymes to learn, because these are simply mirror images of each other. I'll just give you guys a minute to look at that screen to see what I mean by that. Again, when asked to write a key signature that features flats, we can use the same technique we used to identify the name of the key, which was that the note name on which the second flat is on is that of the key signature. So I'll show you guys now how to apply this. So if someone asked you to write the key of, let's say, D flat major, we know that D flat is going to be the second last flat featured on the key signature, meaning that G flat is the last flat. Therefore, the key of D flat major will have a B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, and G flat. I'll just go through that again with a different example. So if someone asked you to write the key of E flat major, we know that the E flat is going to be the second last flat on the key signature, making A the final flat. So E flat major has a B flat, E flat, and A flat. So I have given you quite a few different options on how to do and understand the same thing, really. I just decided in this, being aware of the fact that our brains all work in different ways, and a method that may be confusing to one person is very straightforward and accessible to another. So while I hope I haven't caused any unneeded confusion, by all means just rewatch this video and just select a single method that suits you, and you can just focus on that one. Another thing just to note with major key signatures is also the positioning of the sharps and flats. I've intentionally selected these key signatures because A, they contain all of the sharps that can be featured and all of the flats, and B, because I think this probably, for those of you who are new to music theory, looks very, very scary, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to assure you guys and to really show you that there's nothing new to it. So again here, when we are identifying major key signatures that feature sharps, we go to the last sharp, which in this instance is on a B. B sharp is the same as C. So they're the same note really, so that's the only little kind of thing to be aware of. And so a semitone up from B sharp is C sharp, giving us C sharp major. Here, in purely identifying it, we have the second to last flat, which would be this one, and it's on a C, making this C flat major. So easy peasy. But what I really wanted us to just take a minute to note here is the positioning of the sharps. So while we know the order in which the sharps are written on a key signature from our rhyme, I just wanted to give us an opportunity to look at the position. By that, what I mean is that so long as that we know the first sharp is on the F that is on the top line of the treble clef, it then goes low, high, low, low, high, low. Hopefully you know what I mean by that. And this is something that will just begin to look right, but just to have it out there as a point of reference. And on the flats, we go from this B, high, low, high, low, high, low. So that's a little easier to remember, but as I said, this will just begin to look familiar, and that will likely provide as your main guidance when you're writing key signatures. And now we are going to go on to minor key signatures. So as touched on in lesson 3, there are a number of different types of minor scales that are used in composition of music. So as you may remember, each major scale has a relative minor and vice versa. And what this means is that the sharps and flats present in a major scale and its relative minor are the same, meaning that their key signatures will look the same. Therefore, the key signature alone will often not be enough to inform us whether or not the key or principal tonality of the piece is major or minor. So now we just need to think about how we are going to know if the key is indicating the major tonality or the relative minor. So short from playing out loud, which will often inform you just from the distinct way that major and minor tonalities sound, which one it is, one of the most effective ways in figuring out whether the piece is in a major key or the minor key is by looking at the printed notation that follows and checking if there are any accidentals printed. So what accidentals are? Typically, an accidental is the name we give to a sharp or flat symbol that is printed in the piece that is not already present in the key signature. While accidentals can appear for purely creative reasons and may not always affect the key of the piece, if an accidental is consistently appearing before a particular note, letter name that is, it is likely of more significance. So for example, here on the far left hand side where the key signature is printed, we see there are no sharps or flats. However, as we go through the notation, we notice an accidental here before the G. As we continue on, we notice another one again before a G, which is a good indicator that the tonality and key of the piece may be affected. So I'm just going to go through 3 little bullet points here and then just show you how they're going to tie together to help us to become more familiar with the process of identifying minor key signatures. So, as we've heard before, relative minor and major scales have the same key signature. So the collection of sharps and flats at the far left-hand side of a piece of music looks the same for minor and major scales that are related. We know from lesson 3 that in the harmonic minor scale, the 7th note of the natural minor is raised by a semitone or half step. So the natural minor has the same number of sharps or flats as the relative major. To make it into the harmonic minor, the 7th note is raised by a semitone. Another thing to note is that composers will often use the harmonic and melodic minor scales when writing a piece of music in a minor key. Now I know we haven't gone through melodic minor scales in depth. However, just note that when they're ascending in pitch, the 6th and 7th note of these scales are raised by a semitone. So just to learn now how the knowledge of these 3 things can help us out in minor key signatures. If, for example, in an exam setting you're looking to quickly identify key signature, it may be a good idea to check if the 7th note of the relative minor is the note that frequently has the accidental in front of it. So your key signature, maybe from your rhymes, it might be easiest to identify the major key that is suggested by the collection of sharps or flats at the far left-hand side of the piece of music. However, if after looking through the music you note that there's a certain note name that is consistently altered through the use of an accidental, the next step is to check if this is the 7th note of the relative minor to that major key. Why? Because composers will often use these different harmonic and melodic scales when writing a piece of music. And as we know, the 7th note of these scales is sharpened. So they are the primary reasons as to why it is worth checking this. So now we're just going to take a little example here. So here we look at the key signature in the far left-hand side. May suggest D major because it has an F sharp and C sharp, similar to the D major scale. Some of you may have used our little trick of going one semitone up from the last sharp. C sharp up one semitone is D, D major. However, we now know it is important to review and check for any accidentals that may affect the tonality or key of the piece. We find one here, it's on the A, and another over here, also on the A sharp. So as this accidental is consistently appearing before the note with the louder name A, it's a good suggestion that it may be affecting the tonality or key of the piece. So one of the first things to check is A sharp the seventh note of the relative minor to D major? How do we find the relative minor? From lesson 3, we know we go down 3 semitones. So D down 1 semitone, C sharp or D flat, down another semitone brings us to C, and another semitone brings us to B. So B minor is the relative minor to D major. Step 1, we can write out the natural minor of B minor, which is simply B ascending in order in letter names with the same sharps or flats as its relative major, D major, F sharp and C sharp, as you can see here. We know that in composition, the harmonic and melodic minors are often used. The harmonic minor, which you're most familiar with so far, the seventh note of the scale is sharpened by a semitone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When this is sharpened, it becomes A sharp. And as you can see, A sharp is also the note that is sharpened in this piece of music here. So in the knowledge that minor key signatures appear the same on the left-hand side as their relative major, with the addition of a few specific accidentals, we can now come to this conclusion that this piece of music is in fact in B minor and not D major, as we may have first assumed by looking at the key signature alone. So it is important to have a little look through the piece of music to check for any significant and consistent accidentals. Now, as promised, I'm just going to go through the final few key signatures that we didn't quite cover earlier on in the lesson. Again, these can look quite scary, but that's kind of one of the main reasons why I do want to show you guys them. So we can use the exact same method as always. Go to the last sharp, which is on A sharp, up 1 semitone, brings us to B. This is the key of B major. We now know that it may be important to check for the following music to ensure that it is not in the relative minor. Here, the last sharp is on E. It's E sharp. As we know from one of our earlier lessons, E sharp and F natural are the same note. So up 1 semitone brings us to F sharp major, B sharp, the same as C natural. Again, this is something we went through in lesson 1, I think, so feel free to check out those videos if this is beginning to confuse you. But up 1 semitone from B sharp would be C sharp, because B sharp is the same in pitch as C. So C sharp major. And now on to the final flat key signatures. Second last flat here is G flat major. Second last, C flat major, C flat major. And as always, we will have to just check out the remaining piece of music that follows this key signature to just double check that it is in fact in a major key and not the relative minor. Okay, there was a lot in that, and I have put notes in the description to guide you towards different parts of that video. By all means, take it piece by piece, but I just thought it best to go through major and minor key signatures in the one video so that you can see quite clearly how they relate and how you can use your knowledge of each of them to help you to identify and write those key signatures. Any questions, as always, drop them in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, you can give it a like, and to get a notification when the next video comes out, which at the moment I'm planning to do on time signatures, you can hit the subscribe button. Okay, thanks guys. I'll see you next week.